This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Equality. I mean,
Yeah.
it's probably the most loaded, heavy-lifting word in the human dictionary right now.
Oh, absolutely.
We treat it like this moral reflex, you know? You say the word equality and everyone in the room just nods.
We all agree it's good, it's the goal, and we move on.
Exactly. It's unequivocally good. It's the finish line. But is it?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Because if I asked you right now to really define it, I mean, no buzzwords, no vague feelings of fairness, what is it? Is it a bank balance? A legal right? Is it a spiritual state of mind? Or, is it just a cynical safety valve to keep society from completely burning down?
And that is exactly where today's deep dive is going to take us. We have this fascinating stack of sources. I mean, they range from classical Roman philosophy all the way to modern economic history, and they're going to challenge that reflex.
They really are.
We're going to look at equality not as some nice idea on a bumper sticker, but as a concept that has radically shifted over 2,000 years.
It's a journey through the architecture of how we think. We're going from the ancient Stoics, who basically thought equality was a mental trick, all the way to modern market mechanics, where it's treated more like an engineering problem.
And I want to be really clear with you, the listener.
Yeah.
This is not just abstract philosophy. The sources argue that understanding this whole shift is crucial to understanding the invisible architecture that keeps modern society from, well, collapsing.
We're asking the big one. What kind of world do we actually want?
So let's get into it. The sources suggest we need to start way, way back, toga time.
Right. We're going to ancient Rome. The first major iteration of this idea comes from the Stoics. So think Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. We're talking about 2,000 years ago.
Okay, so we're in Rome, which is, the definition of an unequal society. You've got emperors, senators, and millions of slaves who are legally property. How do you even begin to talk about equality in that world?
Well, that's the trick, isn't it? The version of equality they were selling is probably not what you're thinking.
I'm guessing not.
The Stoics argued that humans are equal in one specific place, in reason. They believed every single human being has a fragment of the divine logos, the ability to think, to choose, and to govern their own reactions.
But that doesn't change the fact that one guy is on a throne and the other guy is in chains.
No, it doesn't. And for the Stoics, that didn't matter. Their whole argument was that the emperor and the slave are equal in the only place that truly counts.
The interior world.
The mind. The soul, yes.
Wait, so if I'm a slave and I'm being mistreated or I'm hungry, the Stoic advice is, what? Don't worry about it. Your mind is free.
Essentially, yes. It's the classic Stoic dichotomy of control. You can't control your station in life. That's up to fate. But what you can control is your reaction to it. Caesar and the stable boy have the exact same capacity for virtue and for inner peace.
I have to be honest, that sounds incredibly convenient for Caesar.
It was. Hey, don't worry about my gold palace. You have your inner peace. And the sources point this out. This version of equality it accepts external inequality as a given.
It doesn't try to change the system.
Not at all. It just says, hey, regardless of your rank, your internal worth is the same.
So it's a coping mechanism. It's not a political program. It's just a way to survive a brutal world.
You could absolutely frame it that way. It's equality without social change. It's psychological armor. But then the sources point to the next big shift, which builds on this idea, Christianity.
All are equal before God.
Right. And this feels like a step forward. It feels heavier.
Yeah, it does.
The idea of imago Dei, that everyone is made in the image of God, is revolutionary. This is where that deep intuition that equality equals good really starts to set in the Western mind. But you have to look at the fine print.
There's always fine print.
The fine print is that, much like Stoicism, this is mostly a vertical relationship. It's about you and God. And for most of history, this was a story of salvation in the next world.
Not a mandate to fix the tax code in this one.
Exactly. The king is still king by divine. Right. The peasant is still a peasant. But don't worry, God loves you both, and you'll be equal in heaven.
So early equality was really about the soul, not the bank account.
It was vertical, not horizontal. You were looking up at the sky, not at your neighbor's assets.
So when does the neck snap down? When do we stop looking up and start looking across at each other and saying, hey, wait a minute, why does he have so much more stuff than me?
That is the modern turn. That's the Enlightenment and the rise of the nation state. This is where equality moves from a spiritual idea to infrastructure.
Infrastructure, that's a great word. It implies we're actually building it.
We are. The sources call this equality under the law. We stop looking at caste or spiritual status and we start looking at the citizen. The law is supposed to be blind.
So if I commit a crime and a duke commits a crime, in theory, we get treated the same.
In theory, we move from status to the individual. But this just created a brand new tension. We had legal equality, but we completely ignored material equality.
Right, because I might be legally equal to a billionaire. We both have the right to a trial. But if he can afford a dream team of lawyers and I can't, how equal are we, really?
That is the question that defines the 19th century, and it leads us to the biggest pivot in this entire story. The Industrial Revolution hits. The gap between rich and poor just explodes, and in walks Karl Marx.
Ah, the boogeyman.
For many, yes. But if you look at it analytically, the source uses this phrase that I think is just brilliant. It says, Marx shifted the entire conversation about equality.
Where to?
From the soul to the stomach.
From the soul to the stomach. Wow, that's visceral.
It changes the whole game. All of a sudden, equality isn't about your legal rights or your place in the afterlife. It's about distribution.
It's about the stuff.
It's about the stuff. Who owns the factories? Who gets the profits? It's countable. It's material. And this definition, equality of the stomach, is what fueled the entire 20th century.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly. The sources basically frame the 20th century as this massive cage match between two systems trying to answer that one question.
The communist experiment versus the capitalist reaction.
So let's talk about that communist experiment first. Because now, it's easy to just say it failed. But why was it so seductive? Why did half the world line up for it?
Because it promised to close the gap. The narrative of communism, that we will eliminate economic hierarchy, was just incredibly attractive to people who were starving inside the legal equality of the industrial age. It promised to fill the stomach.
But the execution?
The execution failed functionally. The source is pretty clear on this. When you try to engineer total economic equality, you crush the incentive to work. If a doctor gets paid the same as a ditch digger, you eventually run out of doctors.
Not to mention the authoritarian nightmares required to enforce it.
Exactly. You have to force people to be that equal, so the engine's stalled. But here's where the sources throw a massive curveball. I think most of us have this mental model of the Cold War where capitalism just knocked out communism.
Right. One boxer wins, the other loses, end of story. Freedom won.
But the sources argue that's not what happened at all. No. And this, for me, this is the huge insight. Capitalism didn't just beat communism.
It what?
It absorbed it.
Absorbed it. Like an immune system taking in a virus.
Exactly. Think about the timeline. To survive the threat of communism, to keep the workers from revolting in London or Chicago or Berlin, the capitalist countries couldn't just stay ruthlessly free market. They had to mutate.
They had to offer a better deal, make sure the workers didn't want to revolt.
Precisely. They introduced labor regulations, they brought in Social Security, the 40-hour work week, redistribution of wealth through taxes. These were all socialist ideas that capitalism adopted to save its own skin.
So to beat the enemy, you become a little bit like the enemy.
You adopt their best weapons.
Yeah.
Capitalism absorbed social democracy. And the source argues that since 1989, since the wall fell, we haven't really been living in pure capitalism. We're in a hybrid.
Capitalism became the universal economic infrastructure.
Yes. Look at China. Look at Vietnam. What are they using? Markets. Price signals. The ideologies clashed, but the systems actually fused. We ended up with this global hybrid where markets drive growth, but the state is expected to manage the fallout.
So we're all just living in this post-ideological soup, turning dials on the same machine.
In a way, yeah. But here's the problem. Just because the systems fused doesn't mean the problem is solved. The sources point to a really grim reality: economic inequality. It's rising again.
You mean measured by the Gini coefficient?
Measured by the Gini coefficient, yes.
Okay, let's pause on that. We see that term in headlines, but let's just break it down really simply.
It's just the standard metric economists use. It's a scale from 0 to 1. 0 is perfect equality. Everyone has the exact same income.
And 1?
1 is perfect inequality. One person has everything and everybody else has nothing.
The king of the world scenario. And we're ticking back up towards the 1.
We are. And this is where the source drops a very uncomfortable historical fact. It references the work of a historian, Walter Scheidel. And he argues that if you look back through thousands of years, there's really only one thing that has successfully radically compressed huge inequality gaps.
I'm afraid to ask, is it taxes? Is it policy?
No, it's what he calls the Great Leveler.
Which is?
Total system-breaking war.
Oof.
And plagues, but mostly war.
And not just small wars.
No, massive mobilization wars. World War II is the classic example. The war destroyed capital. It physically bombed factories and destroyed the assets of the rich. At the same time, the state taxed the wealthy at like 90% to pay for the army, while wages for workers went up because labor was scarce.
So the golden age of the American middle class in the 50s, that wasn't just good policy. It was the aftershock of a global catastrophe.
The source suggests that peace, ironically, allows inequality to grow. When things are stable, capital accumulates. Compound interest does its magic. The rich get richer, and without a massive shock to the system, that gap just naturally widens.
That is incredibly bleak. So if we can't use war because, nukes, and we can't go back to pure communism because it stalls out, what are we left with?
And this brings us to the core argument of this entire deep dive, the paradigm shift. The sources say we have to completely change how we even frame the word equality. We need to stop seeing it as some utopian goal, some perfect finish line we're trying to cross.
Let's see it as a buffer.
Or a system parameter.
A parameter, like a design range for an engine.
Exactly. Think of society like a high-performance engine.
Okay, I'm with you.
On one side of the gauge, you have total equality. If you have that, the engine stalls.
Why?
Incentive dies. If I get the same reward for working 12 hours as I do for 1 hour, I'm just not going to work. Innovation stops. The economy flatlines.
Right. It's stagnation.
But on the other side of the gauge, you have extreme inequality. And if that gap gets too wide, people feel the game is rigged. Trust evaporates, and eventually...
If they burn the whole casino down, the engine explodes.
Exactly. So equality isn't the destination. It's the safe zone on the gauge. It's the sweet spot where people are still motivated to work, but they don't feel the system is so unjust that they need to sharpen the guillotines.
That is such a pragmatic, unromantic way of looking at it. It's not we demand justice, it's we require system stability.
It is cold. But the source argues this is the only way to understand modern governance. And that leads to the final governance test.
Yeah, this part really stood out. The source basically says the political label on the door, democracy, authoritarianism, socialism, it matters a lot less than we think.
It matters less than the ability to pass the test. The ability to achieve what they call performance legitimacy.
Performance legitimacy. So, what have you done for me lately?
Basically. We used to think legitimacy came from, voting. But the source argues that for most people, it comes from results. Can your system control the market?
So what's on the checklist? If I'm government, what do I need to do to keep people from storming the palace?
The source lists 4 non-negotiables. First, can you control extreme gaps? Keep that Gini coefficient out of the red zone.
Check.
Second, can you absorb life-crushing failures? So if someone goes bankrupt or gets sick, do they just die in the street? Or is there some kind of floor?
Is there a shock absorber? Got it.
Third, can you manage crises, pandemics, natural disasters? And fourth, finally, do the tax and budget cycles actually spin? Can you pay the bills?
It's just basic maintenance.
It is. But the implication is profound.
Yeah.
If you can't do those 4 things, if your market control fails, any regime loses legitimacy. It doesn't matter if you were democratically elected. If that stomach equality fails, the system collapses.
So a dictator who keeps people fed might actually be more stable than a democracy that lets them starve.
History would suggest yes. Stability is based on daily life functioning, not abstract philosophy.
This all brings us to a final twist, though, because everything we've just laid out feels very engineering. It's all parameters, buffers, Gini coefficients. It's logical.
It's technocratic, yeah.
But that's not how it feels to be a human being, is it? When we talk about equality, we're not thinking about a spreadsheet. We feel it in our chests. We get angry. We get inspired.
And that is the paradox. The source ends with this really profound thought. Stability keeps systems alive, but stories keep humans moving.
Unpack that.
We can design the perfect economic buffer. We can engineer tax codes to keep inequality in the safe zone. That's the engineering. That keeps the riots away. But that's not enough for the human spirit.
We need a myth.
We need a story. We need to believe that we are equal, not just that our bank accounts are within a safe deviation of each other, but that we matter, that we are, as the Stoics said, equal in reason, or as the Church said, equal in soul.
So equality lives in this weird dual state.
It lives in that strange space between engineering and myth. It is both a cold metric for preventing societal collapse and a story we absolutely cannot live without.
That's heavy. It's like we're trying to balance a mathematical equation with a deep spiritual need.
And I think that's why it's so hard to get right. If you treat equality only as a myth, only as an ideal, you ignore the economics, the Gini coefficient spikes, and the system crashes.
But if you treat it only as a metric,
you ignore human dignity. You might get a stable society, but it will be a soulless one. The soul withers.
You need both. You need the soul and the stomach.
You need the soul and the stomach. You need to believe we are all brothers and sisters. And you need the policy that ensures one brother isn't starving while the other one feasts.
So as we wrap this up, I want to leave the listener with that question the source poses at the very end. It's a pretty provocative one.
It asks, what kind of world do we actually want? Do we want a world of perfect equality? Or do we just want a world that is adjusted enough so that it isn't dangerous?
And maybe more importantly, are we chasing equality because we want a fair spreadsheet? Or are we chasing it because it's the only story that makes any sense of our suffering?
That's the question. Are we engineers or are we believers?
I think we're probably both. And that's what makes it so damn complicated.
Indeed. It's the human condition.
That does it for this deep dive. It's a topic that usually starts an argument, but hopefully, today, it started some thinking. Thanks for listening.
Keep thinking.
See you next time.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.